you have to understand what is your purpose.
Thank you, Selar. I really appreciate you coming out. The reason why I was quite keen to do this conversation was that I feel like we have a common passion, which is helping others and fundamentally service to mankind. Just wanted to have a conversation about what has been driving you in this direction, what motivates you, and fundamentally what are you doing in helping others now?
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks for the opportunity. It's nice to be talking on a magnificent Brisbane day. I guess this is to where I am now. There's a 20-year journey becoming more exposed to what is social impact and what is community and how can I play my part in both planetary and human health and well-being. So I started becoming exposed to these ideas and concepts at a very localised community level in New Zealand, where I began working in community development in a volunteer capacity, leading organisations, implementing programs and funding sustainability for community groups and things like that while I was running up my own business. And then from there I realised that I had a passion for that and that there was an opportunity for me to actually look at how do I make that potentially a career. And so one of the next pathway for that was actually that I began working for an environmental international organisation. And I, for the first time, started fundraising and working on the financial sustainability effectively for an environmental organisation working in New Zealand. And that opened up huge exposure really and opportunities around, well, what is fundraising, what are the different aspects of it, how does this environmental organisation actually work, how does it engage with companies. We're at the forefront of corporate social responsibility, so what is CSR? How were large companies and small considering these things? What were the barriers and their blocks? And that sort of set a bit of a chain reaction in my mind that just sort of bubbled below the surface for quite a while. I then moved to Australia nearly 8 years ago to pick up a role where, rather than working for a single brand within the charity space, I started working for an agency where we were developing propositions and financial programs for charities so they could increase their donor base and increase the money that they had available to deliver their mission. And what I started to realise working with large and small charities across Australia and New Zealand is big funding gaps and big issues that they were trying to address around how they could deliver their mission in a more effective way. That then started to link a little bit more into the CSR background that I had and thinking about that, began engaging with people around investment, and then last year I actually moved to a boutique investment company as a general manager where I started to bring together the social aspect of what I had been doing with the traditional world of investment and started to look at ESG frameworks. What is impact within the property sector? What does that look like? What does it mean? Where is the long-term development of that going? So what are the international standards that are being developed? Which then set me on a much further path around ESG, so environmental social governance, and how the world is really piling on with ESG. And last year began thinking about how I could more effectively transition into, well, what does social sector need and investment look like if they were put together? And have started working on much greater concepts around social investment now and set up my own company at the end of last year to do exactly that. So our purpose is to identify and open up investment opportunities for social outcomes, so effectively bringing those two worlds together. And initially I thought that I was going to work with charities to solve their funding gaps, but actually the problems are much bigger than that, and the problems at a community and regional level that people are looking for are really system change and community level change, and that requires big picture, big vision, a lot of different players coming together. And so we've adjusted slightly to now start working on community-centered social investment models. So we've got agreements now in place and further ones pending where we're actually going to be working on international development at a community central level to actually solve not solve all of the problems, but put in place the mechanisms that they need to help solve issues around education and literacy, workforce development, health and well-being, gender parity and opportunities for women, social infrastructure, community infrastructure, housing, economic diversity, the protection of the environment within their community and their environs, and how to make responsible, diverse income sources work for them and for their communities over not an investment horizon of 12 months or 5 years, but a community horizon of 25, 50 and 100 years. Because for long-term community well-being and resilience, those are the horizons that we need. So that actually means reinventing the investment products to make that work.
Definitely.
So that starts to touch into a whole lot of other things around concepts of regenerative finance and how the financial paradigm has to shift to actually meet those needs. Because as investment is traditionally seen right now, it doesn't have long-term horizons, but it needs to. There's a lot of stuff coming out of Europe that's recognizing that now, and there's a lot of development being done conceptually, theoretically, and actively in how can the financial industry shift to meet the need at a community level for the health and well-being of both those communities and the planet, effectively. It's a very, very exciting space to be in. So globally, a lot of my networking right now and the connections that I'm doing, about 80% is all global, and it's all focused on what is regenerative finance, how might regenerative finance apply, what type of aggregation of projects or funding or community level change is needed, and how might we best meet that.
What's regenerative finance?
That's a really good question, and it's a concept that's been bandied around a reasonable amount, and there isn't a cohesive answer, which is why I'm part of a global initiative to actually answer that now, which is to actually say, well, what are the principles of regenerative finance and what does that mean? Regeneration is coming, it's been used within several contexts: development, property, urban planning, medicine, law, health, as well as agriculture, which is one of the big ones. But fundamentally, nature is inherently regenerative. So it produces, it grows, it dies, it reproduces. Our economy is essentially built on two premises: extraction and growth.
Yeah.
What we haven't worked out is how to regenerate very well. And if we extract something, then we have to put something back in. We've moved from sustainability to regeneration because sustainability says we can extract and replace what we extract only, but that doesn't mean that we have the opportunity of continuing to grow. That's a status quo only. So regeneration is taking that concept further and saying we have to look at this holistically within our supply chains, within our products, within our services, and within the way that we live, to be more connected and more holistic in what we're doing and how we're doing it. And that actually means putting more back over the next probably 10, 20, 50 years. Carbon sequestration is a good example of that, and all of the different permutations around that. Reforestation, creation of new habitats, things like that, getting smarter about the way that we are producing our products and managing our business activities. To a point where we have things a lot healthier than where they are right now. So then maybe we can talk about long-term sustainability from that point.
You mentioned another concept that I don't understand. Carbon
sequestration. So that's pulling the carbon out of the atmosphere.
That's what Elon Musk's vision is.
And either using technology to embed carbon in, for example, new technologies like concrete blocks that actually have carbon put into them at the manufacturing process, to carbon in the soil, so soil health, and ensuring that we have healthy soils with a healthy level of carbon, growing more trees because their carbon sinks, improving our mangroves, our coastal environments, fixing the pollution and the acidification that's occurring in the oceans, because the ocean is a great carbon sink as well. All of those sorts of things combined are all part of that carbon sequestration idea.
Probably that will be a very relevant element to maybe reversing the damage that we've done to nature.
That's correct.
So, because it seems like even if we transition to sustainability quite fast, that might not be enough to deal with the environmental.
And that's why no one really now is talking about sustainable. They're talking about regeneration, because they've realised that actually sustainability itself means a status quo. Regeneration means a much more holistic and healthy way of actually regenerating what we need. All of the resources that we need, the ecosystem services that we rely on, ensuring that those are healthy and can continue to support life, not just our own, but everything.
Definitely.
So now put that into a community context, and we're working deliberately in emerging economies, and we're getting these people coming to us and talking to us about how can you help us look at this holistically, not extractively, and say we have resources now, how do we maintain those, how do we foster health and well-being in those resources, and in turn our community, so that we're still here in 100 years or 200 years or even longer. And coming back to regenerative finance, what are the finance mechanisms that are actually needed to enable that to occur? And that's a really interesting global conversation that's occurring right now.
Yeah, I'm very interested in this. I feel like to a certain degree, a lot of people are mainly focused on their bottom line, and they don't care that much about others, about I don't know what will be in 100 years from now on. I'm wondering, first of all, what is driving you in this direction? Does it come from a religious perspective? Does it come from a childhood upbringing that you had? And then what are the elements that you've seen that were most successful in helping others fundamentally? Because I feel like it's a very, very tough thing to do.
Yeah, good questions both. The first answer is awareness and effectively consciousness raising. So as people are becoming more aware of the fundamental problems that were occurring, climate change, it's been talked about for over 100 years, but 50 years concertedly and 30 years with some substantial effort. Now we're seeing the effects. They're actually hitting home. As a result, people are realising that change is necessary. The next part about that is actually a real shift in how can business, rather than just be an activity, actually provide a service, a greater service, be of service to the community. And that is developing, that is manifest in profit for purpose or profit through purpose. And that is something that's been talked about a lot more. So now you're starting to see this huge uplift in social enterprise, profit for purpose business, impact investing, which is really picking up on that. The number of incubators and venture studios that are really targeting that. And this is a very good example. I'm actually a business advisor to a startup incubator and venture studio in Florida that is the first of its kind in the world, focusing on the oceans and how to fix the problems that are manifesting right now within the oceans. Pollution, acidification, abuse of resources, things like that. And the purpose is driving the opportunities, both from the context of the business model that is being developed itself, but also in the way that the venture studio, which the concept of that is to have problems come to the studio and then be solved, as well as all of the startups that are going to sit within that venture studio and the incubator that are targeting specifically new technologies for the benefit of the oceans. Some of those will be profit businesses, some of those will be profit for purpose businesses, and some of those will be non-profits, I suspect, or social enterprise, but all of them have a common purpose, which is to recreate healthy oceans again.
This is probably a topic that I'm not too educated on. How can we through technology improve the health of our oceans? Can you give us a few examples?
Well, there's a lot. On one side, how we deal with nutrient runoff from soil and land and farmed land, agricultural land, how that's running, and chemical runoff as well that's going into our oceans. How in our supply chains we're managing production of different aspects of the products that we're producing, what that means and how. The pollution that is going into the oceans themselves, our resource depletion within the ocean, better management of that, understanding what our fish stocks globally are collapsing. So how do we actually regenerate our fish stocks so that the knock-on effect of that, how do we feed ourselves? There's billions of people that rely on fish protein. Exploration and use of resources from the ocean, but doing that in such a way that actually we don't deplete, we actually conserve. All of those aspects come into play. So technology can be everything from robotics and evaluation and monitoring to capturing, to smarter resource use, anything. Could be energy generation using wave technology and turbines and things like that as well. That's another opportunity that is still being explored and is still early days. So technology can be applied across the board, but fundamentally the technology can't be in and of itself. It has to serve. There has to be a purpose to the technology.
Yeah, I remember I've read a study at some point in the past. I think it was made by an American university, saying that your happiness increases directly proportional with your income up to $75,000 per year. I'm not sure if that's per person or per household. After that, you can only increase your level of happiness further if you do stuff contributing to other people, maybe helping the oceans, maybe helping the poor. So I'm just wondering, what do you think is the handbrake that is preventing more people to devote a bit more of their time and resources to the benefit of others?
I actually think the handbrake is off. I think this is the upswing now. I think this is the paradigm shift globally. It's early. There's a lot of that. We can see the shift occurring within certain sectors. We can see the early stages of it, like impact investing is a good is it putting it back into a finance perspective. Green bonds is another example, but they represent a small proportion of the overall financing that's occurring globally. But the shift is dramatic. They're talking about 2050, that we need to be net zero by then, but we have a window of 10 years to take action now to achieve anywhere near that. So we're going to see this continued huge upswing of adoption of ethical investing demands around workplaces, human rights, environmental extraction and damage. We've got interesting concepts growing like ecocide, which is actually using the deliberate destruction of the environment as an international crime and how to treat that. So there's a big shift in how we can be more socially responsible within a societal context. Now there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done along the way, and this is where the social sector is still going to be incredibly relevant. And I think we're starting to see a merging of the private sector and the social sector coming together to actually meet the demands of our society and our social ills to try and redress the balance and get it working a lot better. But we've still got issues around poverty, food security, gender, religious intolerance, all of those sorts of things are still driving huge issues globally that somehow we have to mitigate and ameliorate and make better if we can. And I think that fundamentally, I think there is a searching out now for people of purpose. How do I live a more purposeful life? For exactly what you were just describing. I want to have a business, but I don't just want to be making money. I want to be doing something with that business. Or I want to serve the community, but I need to support myself and my family. So how do I do that? So it's the bringing together of those two things, which is really, really exciting.
And I see that, yeah, to as you said, it's to a certain degree there is also a trend. Oh, look at the scenery. There is also a trend in how more and more people are sort of trying to fit those two pieces together. And to a certain degree, I don't know, maybe how in the 50s it was cool to do shady stuff. I feel like it's becoming more and more cool and more people are getting closer. But still,
you see, ethical investing is becoming a big deal now, right? People are talking about this. It's actually one of the largest voted blocks in relation to shareholding now globally. And the influence that they can have is for positive change. And one of the things that we're starting to see is that impact coming through in greater responsibility. And unfortunately in Australia, one of the worst examples that we had was Rio Tinto's destruction of the caves in the Juukan Gorge last year in WA. And the realisation that that was a complete failure, essentially, of their espoused values. And the consequences have been significant for the people in the company, and it's shifting the way that the company engages and will do business overall. And it's unfortunate that had to happen for there to be a shift, but sometimes we need those big unfortunate circumstances for us to realise, well, we can't continue that way anymore.
I'm definitely on the same page with you here, but I'm just wondering, what would be a piece of advice or information that you think would potentially make more people be conscious and aware and motivate them that they need to do a little bit for others as well? I feel like not enough people.
Well, the other big upswing is in, well, how do I understand my purpose? So one of the big parts of what I do now as in business advisory is uncovering your purpose through your business, or manifesting your purpose through your business. So you have to understand what is your purpose. So uncovering that is actually not necessarily that easy and can take time. So when you understand what your purpose is, and then you can work out how to deliver that, say through business activities, then the strategy and the planning and what you need starts to fall into place a lot easier. So I'm myself and other people that I'm associated with sort of in the regenerative and purpose-led space, a lot of us are consulting now on how do you define your purpose, what does that mean, how can that be authentic, and how can you manifest that out in the world for positive change while also looking after your own well-being and your own family or community. So there is a big upswing in people seeking that out and understanding how to do that. Somebody termed it the other day as unconventional consulting. And I think that's true, and I think there's a lot of that going on right now, which is great. More of it means that we will start to see the younger people coming through that have a greater sense of purpose and ethical values, saying, well, no, I want to make sure that what I'm doing is actually beneficial for planet and people, not just beneficial for me and my bank balance.
To a certain degree, yeah, I really see this moving, becoming more and more powerful, but I also feel like the desire to help others is also a bit not affected, motivated by a certain level of higher education and maybe a better moral and spiritual level. So I'm wondering if you have the same vision, and if yes, how could people, do you think, could improve their sense of morality and spirituality?
Well, I think a lot of people don't have time for that because they're struggling to just make ends meet. You know, survival in a rich Western country like Australia, and a developing country like India, and a very poor country like some of the ones in Africa, the issue of survival is actually remarkably similar. Because if you're struggling to put food on the table and look after your family, then you don't have time to think about purpose and what you want to be doing with your life.
Yeah.
You're just struggling every hour of every day to meet the needs of that hour and that day. So it really does come down to education and being able to empower people to make those decisions for themselves. So the work that we're going to be working in multiple emerging economies, and it has to be community centred. So what does the community need to support their population to be sustainable? And what does that actually mean? So one of the biggest projects that we're scoping out right now, 80% of the population is illiterate. Well, we can't solve that. That's not for us to solve. That's up to the community to solve. But what are the tools that they need, and what international resources can come together to support that? And how can that then be set up in such a way that the community can maintain and run that themselves and continue that education cycle? That's a fundamental question, and I don't think anybody necessarily knows what the answer to any of that is yet. But certainly, those are some of those big issues that need to be explored.
Can you develop a bit further on this? I'm wondering, what, in your opinion, is the solution to education on a number of levels? What's the solution to help people that are illiterate, as you said, bring them faster up? What's the solution to people that maybe have limited understanding of financials and how to be smart about money to bring them faster up? I'm wondering on those two things.
Well, to answer the second one first, examples like microfinancing, where you empower women by giving them microloans, tiny amounts of money that is all they need to get their little business enterprise up and running, transforms the next generation, transforms their livelihoods and that of the next generation. That's a really good example of making manifest.
Can you give us a few numbers or some studies about this? Because this is new to me.
Yeah, not off the top of my head.
Okay.
No,
okay.
I can't. I'm not a specialist in microfinancing. But there are examples around the world where both in the social sector and increasingly in the private sector, they recognise the value of microfinancing into these communities that then enables them to support themselves and to educate the next generation. I think workforce development is going to be a critical thing. So if you do have a community that is struggling, that is subsistence, then we don't need to go into that community and tell them what they need. That's the old mindset. That has failed over and over and over again. We need to be invited into those communities and to help them uncover what they need, and then to give them the tools to enable it to be put in place. it's a different mindset.
So fundamentally, getting from people from the ground to level
They
one,
already know what they need.
microfinance might be one of the best solutions.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be one of the solutions. It won't be the only. It'll be one, and that won't work for all people, but it'll work for some people. And what I do know is that something extraordinary, like the repayment rate on microfinance loans to women, is something in the order of 97%.
I heard that number as well. That it's also higher for women than it's for men.
That's correct. Yeah, I'm not even going to go into what that suggests. So the communities already know what they need. They either don't have the resourcing, or they don't have the access, or there isn't the integrity yet in the systems to enable that uplift across the board. And they're hungry for that, I think, and they're finding their way. But there's a lot of legacy systems that need to be thrown out or reimagined or reinvented. And unfortunately, we see that in Australia now with the way that Aboriginal people are treated, institutionalised, the lack of recognition in the Constitution, the fact that reparations have not been fully realised here. There's a whole lot of things in relation to that. We're starting to see that movement gain traction. Well, it's been underway in New Zealand for 30 or 40 years. They're probably one of the leaders globally. It's underway in Canada. There's the nascent early stages of this being discussed in America now with the USA. I see that there are discussions now that are starting to occur in relation to that in Southern American countries as well. So Indigenous people know what they need, and actually the world view or the Indigenous view is something that is gaining greater prominence within regeneration, because those cultures have been operating within their environments for thousands and thousands of years, and in the case of Australia, 45 to 60,000 years. They already know how to operate within their environment. So we actually need to be learning a lot more from them about what does regeneration mean within our community context. And they're starting to speak up, which is great, because we've got a lot to learn, I think. But that doesn't take away our built environments and our modern society and all of those other things. It's now about the integration of those two things, which I just find tremendously exciting as a new way forward, which really comes back to purpose. This is what I now get up and do every day. It's fantastic. I found a way of integrating my passion for the social sector and helping the environment and people, and integrating that with the concepts of investment and finance.
Beautiful. Seems like you have a purpose-driven life.
I have a purpose-driven life, that's exactly right. Yes. So even my business advisory and coaching that I do is all nested within that purpose, because I see these young people that want to have purpose through their business activities, and peer groups that are driving impact startups. It's all within the same realm, and I'm seeing that become manifest in what they're doing. It's great to be a part of it, and it's going to be even more exciting now when I start working with global communities on what they need and how we can help facilitate and support those changes that they want.
So fundamentally, helping less privileged communities grow and thrive and improve, what are the fundamental elements that they need as resources besides money? Is there any frameworks that you've seen that work, any coaching? I'm just wondering what else they need besides money.
Money is definitely a big part of it. Even if I put it within the context of agriculture. So I'm part of an initiative here in Australia focusing on empowering the transition to regenerative agriculture. And one of the things that keeps coming up time and time again is that the financing to support the transition from maybe an existing or commonly called traditional farming practice to a regenerative farming practice doesn't exist. So how do we finance that transition? How do we support those farmers and ventures and communities to adopt a more regenerative approach to their activities if the financial system itself doesn't support it? Well, we have to reinvent it, or we have to have a paradigm shift. That's a really good example of access barriers and a lack of understanding about what that community needs to actually to facilitate a greater adoption of something that is actually greatly beneficial for both our own well-being as well as the planet. So finance is a big component of that, but it's not all, because the other aspects that we need to address is market access, consumer access, product to market, awareness raising, education, steps, like how do people become regenerative, what does that mean, how do we support and facilitate that within a cultural context as well as within a practical context. So there are lots of tools and mechanisms that are going to be required to support any community as it identifies the areas that it wants to transition to, and then how it's going to do that. And I think a lot of those communities themselves will be able to invent or come up with those solutions if they are empowered to do it. And now we need to understand, well, what does that empowerment mean?
Definitely.
It's very open. I appreciate that's a very open answer, but it's not up to us to dictate.
Now my next question is, in business, I feel like to a certain degree, it's always good to look at your return on investment. And judging from our discussion, seems like a return on investment, but on the impact size, a thing to do to get a higher return is this microfinance. I'm wondering what other investments or way to put money in action have you seen that created very high returns compared to the money that was contributed?
Well, that's all about context, isn't it? So in Australia, a lot of investors are still demanding, you'll know this from property, high returns of 10, 15, 20% per year. In Europe, there are negative interest rates. You're lucky if you get a 1% return on anything, right? So it's about context. There has to be an adjustment. But if you're going to invest in bonds, well, what's the bond rate right now? 3-4%. If you're doing fixed interest bonds at an institutional level, they're operating on 4 or 5%. They're not expecting 15%. So I think there's a disconnect between the financial return that we were used to and the financial return that is coming. And we need to lessen our expectations around a short-term high financial return for a longer-term sustained financial and social return. That's my opinion. A lot of people disagree, and that's fine. They're allowed to disagree. They're going to be able to continue to invest in and demand high returns. In the world that I operate, that's not where things are going. So whether it's institutional investment, global investment through all of the financial arms that large organisations like the UN and the World Bank, etc., have access to, private foundations, large institutional investors as well, things like BlackRock, etc., they're looking at how can they balance those financial returns and those social returns. So the dynamic is shifting.
I totally understand that. And now I personal question. As I grow my position, I'm considering to open up a charity.
Yep. Yep.
That in my vision will deal with five problems fundamentally: food, water, health, shelter, and education.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a broad remit.
It's pretty broad. Fundamentally, I feel like there is. You just don't know what will have the biggest impact long term. So being a bit broader can potentially reap better rewards long term. And I'm wondering, from the charity work that you've seen in the past, what would be a blueprint of achieving great outcomes?
That's a big question, Dan. Oh my goodness. You can be very locally focused on a single area, like just single-minded and very localized, and that works. Or you can be a global organization like Oxfam International, working at massive scale in water, sanitation, health and well-being, right? So humanitarian response. There's lots of different ways you can do that. I'm on the board of a charity that is doing intervention in kinship care and welfare for children globally. But what it's doing is it's focusing on the delivery aspects of the on-the-ground organizations that are already the experts, and it's providing them with a supportive framework and infrastructure as an alliance globally to share that knowledge and to learn from others and to increase their impact. That's another way, that particular charity is doing it. As an individual, one of the things that myself and the directors of my company decided is that when we set it up, it was important for us, yes, to look after ourselves and to have our own legacies for our own families, but also to put something forward, to have a legacy that goes beyond just us. And so we very deliberately decided that we're going to be channeling some of the profits of our business into our own foundation. So that private foundation will then be looking at impact and outcomes that we can invest in. Some may be returnable, some may be purely philanthropic. That could be anywhere in the world that meet the expectations of what we want to see, our own personal interests. Now we've got it beneficially. We've come together under effectively a common remit, right? So we all agree on what we want to achieve. So that is how a lot of people now are channeling their wealth and providing a social return. There are some drawbacks with that. There is some criticism about that, particularly if you have created all of your wealth through extraction and exploitation, which unfortunately a lot of people have done. They're using their foundations to make amends, and we can judge that or otherwise. But I think the new breed of people that are wanting to have profit through purpose are going to still become very wealthy and very rich. Some of them will. So what do you do with that money? And I think if you've got a purpose that underpins what you're wanting to do, then the ability for you to actually channel that through existing charities, foundations, collaborations, joint ventures, or your own work provides you with that flexibility to do that. So coming back to your actual question, which was what would be the model, I would actually look at becoming a donor to an organisation that's already operating in the area that you are wanting to work in. Maybe also volunteering in a way that you can actually go and see their projects and express your interest.
And maybe in a way in which can potentially enhance what they're already doing.
Potentially, if that's useful, if it's a larger organisation, then it's going to be more around how can I support it by, could I become an advisor? Could I sit on their advisory council? Are they open to that? Are they looking for my expertise? Is that useful? Or having a very clear idea and following through with it. You know, there's some extraordinary number of 50,000 plus charities in Australia alone, but there's really only a couple of hundred that are earning over $1 million a year. So there's a lot of people with great intentions who are doing very, very good work at a very, very small level, and that's great. The question will be, well, what do you want to achieve out of that? And how might you best do that? And that's an ongoing conversation with who's doing it now, where are the gaps, how can I help, how can I plug the gap, how much wealth have I got, how much do I want to contribute, what expertise do I need to be able to facilitate that, so that your best intentions don't flounder, but actually your best intentions have that same purpose and will continue to move forward.
I feel like, you've given me the model. The model is a number of questions, like in those 5 directions, what are the gaps? How can the gaps be better addressed? And fundamentally, what is the number that is going to be contributed? And to a certain degree, I feel like not enough people donate a small percentage of what they have, and the mental picture that I have is going to your destination with 100 kilometers per hour or going to with only 90 kilometers per hour is virtually similar. That's how donating 10% and only using 90% of your income will not change the way you're living your life fundamentally.
And a large part of our community does already donate. That's not fixing fundamentally our social ills, so more needs to be done. So therefore we're coming right back to the finance question, which is how do we get more money into the social sector because of the lack of capacity and capability within the social sector to meet the needs necessarily and the expectation of society that the social sector is going to fix everything, when frankly speaking a lot of the activity coming out of the private sector is causing the problem. Environmental degradation, poverty, war, over-resources, greed and corruption, these are all issues within the private sector, generally. So a greater hybridization, I think, and a greater integration between private and public or business activity and social outcome is actually going to see, I think, a greater opportunity to solve a lot of those problems.
Yeah, that definitely gives me a bit of insight of how I could improve my further plans.
I don't think it's any different actually, but because I've been in the social sector for such a long time, and I've done charity strategies and marketing strategies and gone out and raised, equivalent of hundreds of millions of dollars. The questions are fundamentally the same. What's your purpose? What are you trying to achieve? What's the problem that you're trying to solve? And how are you going to get there? So you can bring the same discipline and rigor to a social idea as you can to a business idea. And then you can work out how to integrate them.
Definitely. Selar, I really appreciate you sharing your insights with us today. How can people reach you?
A real pleasure. That's it. They can find me on LinkedIn, I guess. It's probably one of the easiest ways. It's certainly a good opportunity for networking.